Hi, friends. Gene Valentino. Welcome to another episode of Gene Valentino's Grassroots Truthcast. Hey, when you come across someone you've been doing some of these broadcasts with and you say, boy, that's someone I'd like to have on with me. Well, here she is. Welcome, Wendy Patrick from San Diego. How are you, Wendy?
Oh, Gene, it's a pleasure to join you. I'm a fan of your show.
Career politician, done over 170 cases in her role in law, in the prosecution of the law against criminals, primarily on the West Coast. But she's morphed into a sort of an interesting role of providing a balance of thinking in this in the cases that are being publicly seen in the world news and in the media. And we're going to have a longer conversation with her on many of the hot issues that now are before us here in the United States, not just locally, right after this.
Hey, everybody, this is Mark Mitchell, head pollster of The Honest Poll, thehonestpoll.com. Make sure you go check out Grassroots Truthcast at grassrootstruthcast.com with Gene Valentino and subscribe while you're there. It's a great show.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets, as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, My Pillow mattresses and My Pillow mattress toppers, as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets, regular $69.98. Now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, there's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm with Wendy Patrick. We're going to discuss some political issues facing the United States of America, from crime to public safety to the criminal justice system. We've got some constitutional questions which become the ripple effect of a broader conversation, and legal stories that are now today dominating the headlines. Wendy had one or two points, and I said to her before the show, Wendy, it's your show. Bring forward the top two or three issues that are hot. And in this context today, I'm going to jump in on some of the stuff you're interested in talking about. Go for it.
You know, one of the stories that we've been following very closely recently is, of course, the Tyler Robinson prelim from last week.
Yeah.
This is the assassin who took the life of Charlie Kirk, just a beloved Christian activist and spokesperson and inspiration to so many. I had him on my own radio show last year. And, you know, the high-profile nature, I would say, combined with the public safety issues that were involved in the prelim, really helped to get this on the map. And then, of course, it became plagued with conspiracy theories, but credible evidence is the antidote to false beliefs. And I think that last week was really an opportunity for anybody that wanted to watch to be able to see that front and center. But I think I shared with you before the show that it is true that we saw a week's worth of testimony, everything from forensics to ballistics to DNA to video footage to statements that Tyler Robinson's lover, his roommate, that were actually played on Zoom. The roommate, of course, will have to be present in person at trial. But all that to say, it really made a lot of people think to themselves, how do we have an assassination able to be pulled off in broad daylight with a crowd of 3,000 people in attendance? Like, how does that happen to begin with? And many parents of college-aged kids are having these conversations with their teenagers, with their young adults, saying, you've got to keep your head on a swivel. Even if you appear to be in a broad open space where there's been no warnings, no threats level of any kind, you just never know when something is going to happen, even here right out in the open. And I'm sure that's a conversation you have with your loved ones as well as we continue to watch these cases unfold. We talked about it right after Butler, Pennsylvania, after the president was shot. And we're continuing to see these attacks today.
But Wendy, what is the issue that has taken a hearing for probable cause to meet the threshold of probable cause now become weeks as if this was the full trial itself. What's going on with the court case itself that causes, we don't even have an admission of guilt yet. We don't have a plea yet. What is going on with the court case in this case?
Well, Gene, that's been the question that many have asked me all last week. And the answer continued to show itself as solid and then even more corroborated as the week went on. It's the significance of the hearing. It's the public scrutiny of the evidence. It's the objections that were made by the defense to every piece of evidence, which every single time led to extended discussion and argument on both sides. So it's a very litigious hearing every single day, not to mention the fact that it's so closely watched. And it's a death penalty case. The charges are so serious that this judge did not want to take any opportunity for error. Prosecutor didn't either. They were crossing their T's, reviewing their work to make sure there's nothing that might cast doubt on the integrity of the conviction and a potential death sentence down the line. So you heard day one, day two, they were laying the foundation. They were talking about video footage of the man alleged to be Tyler Robinson, then linking that dot up, connecting it with other dots like DNA evidence, gun ballistic evidence, and then finally culminating on Thursday with statements that were actually made by Tyler Robinson, not on social media, not just in text messages, but in a note left for the roommate. And then finally, the day after the assassination, verbal admission of guilt to the roommate, who of course testified on Zoom last
But
Thursday.
full stop right there. There's enough. It leads to the, I'm not a lawyer, but I know enough to know that you've got probable cause there.
Right. You don't need to be a lawyer. That's a great point, Gene. That's the reason that I was asked that so many times last week is, armchair lawyers are saying, wait a minute, there is we haven't seen enough for probable cause. And that was
Right.
true. Hence the sort of overproduction of evidence, over-analysis. And we still don't have a ruling by the judge because that's going to be briefed between now and September 1st. But it's just one of those cases, Gene, that nobody wants to make a mistake. And sometimes in cases like this, which could have taken a day, you do have extended analysis just to make sure no mistakes are made. You know what? It may seem like time spent now, but it will end up being time saved in the future down the line when we get to trial, because a lot of this has just been fleshed out by both sides and the judge in the courtroom last week.
Folks, we're talking with Wendy Patrick, honored among California's leading professional responsibility lawyers. And Wendy, that kind of gets to the point. Have they put more of the case in the pre-trial hearing process or to short circuit the length of the trial case itself? Or is this just an exacerbation of a longer case?
No, not that either. And it's such a great question, because wouldn't you wonder that as a civilian
Yeah.
who's not a lawyer? You would think, wait a minute, why are we doing all this now? Don't we have a trial? Isn't that going to be the purpose? It's actually just the purpose of probable cause, but the defense appears to be testing the admissibility of a variety of different pieces of evidence. And a prelim is the place to do that, because you don't want to go into a trial and think, gosh, I wonder what my trial strategy is going to be. I have no rulings to guide my thinking and what I'm going to emphasize if you're the defense. Gene, I'll share with you, I started my legal career as a criminal defense attorney, so I know a little bit about that side of the aisle as well.
Yeah.
And here's the equities there. A judge is not going to allow such explosive, gruesome, gory photos and details to be put into the public sphere now at prelim stage, because that could potentially taint the ability to retain a fair jury by the time we get to trial, because the defendant's entitled to due process. He gets a fair jury, and he has the right, that jury tainted by too much pretrial evidence being out there in the public sphere. Now, many people might say, wait a minute, it was already there before prelim, but that wasn't admissible, and that can't be the basis upon which a jury is allowed to base a verdict. In fact, in the deliberation room, and I've been doing this for 30 years, you will find that jurors act as checks and balances on each other. When somebody says something and then other jurors will say, where did you hear that? You can only use evidence that came out in court, not back on X in February or in social media by a commentator or on a podcast somewhere. So that's the reason you don't see, Gene, this over exacerbation of evidence, this, overproduction at prelim. It was a long prelim, but that didn't necessarily make it over inclusive when it came to the evidence that was presented. A lot of it was argument.
Is this process the exception or the rule, though? I understand Utah has some unique preliminary hearing rules that are not unlike other states.
No, this was the exception. Even in Utah, a murder prelim wouldn't have lasted 5 days. So you could
Okay.
ask that question. This is the exception.
Well, that's my point. I don't understand why. What's the motivation for this? Is it television? Is it the nature of the case? The level of the public figures being such notoriety? Pardon me?
It's the last two. It's the nature of the case and the public figures involved. That's what it is. And when you have a case like that, everybody is very, very careful to make sure that they make a perfect record to the best that they can. And it's so closely watched. And there are so many conspiracy theories, I'll throw that out there, Gene, as well, that the judge wants to make sure he does everything he can to only admit credible evidence. The amount of hoops that he required both sides jump through in order to introduce a piece of evidence demonstrated that. And remember also, Gene, not everything that the courtroom gallery got this live stream to the viewing public. So that also was a measure the judge took to try to prevent everything getting out there into the court of public opinion where it could be recirculated before trial.
How are national politics and being impacted by state and local issues? This is what I'd call the ripple effect of local interests or regional interests now taking on having national import. What say you about that?
I have long said that issue really highlights the importance of public safety, which is a bipartisan passion. Yet, we often hear it discussed in conservative circles as if, Democrats weren't doing enough to try to uphold public safety. I've never met a Democrat that didn't want their kids to be safe walking to school. We share that as humanity. We all want to keep ourselves safe, our families safe, our communities safe. But it does seem, when you look at statistics, like we've seen a lot of high pro-tax in public being made towards conservatives. And that's one of the narratives. Now, there's a counter narrative to everything, but it's one of the narratives that has heavily been proven to be divisive in terms of, what you talk about locally that's going on nationally. We talked about the same thing after Butler, Pennsylvania, when the president was shot in the ear. We talked about the same thing when you had that UFC fight. You had the plot that was going to go on the president's 80th birthday. Thank God that was a success story, that that plot was foiled. But so many of these attempts that occur in broad daylight and that occur almost in the wake of a similar attempt when you would think to yourself, why wasn't this avenue of approach shored up? We said that about the White House press correspondence dinner, where the assailant was able to, run right through the metal detectors. And so those are the types of events that occur nationally, but really do have a ripple effect locally. But I'm the ultimate, Christian optimist. Everybody, no matter what your politics are, care about how can we keep our community safe for all of us. So it's actually an issue I enjoy talking about because it's bipartisan.
Well, your divinity studies as well seem to give an interesting angle to this discussion, unlike your typical lawyer. I know you're a doctor in law, but you're also, with your divinity background, you're injecting a social, cultural, humanitarian component to the way we look at law, which drives to my question, where the heck is the legal system going in the future? I mean, I'm going to take some anxiety medicine because this is getting too crazy to try to keep in perspective. Just your ability to either defend an alleged wrongdoer or prosecute the alleged wrongdoer it must be driving you nuts as well from your side of the bench.
My PhD is actually in theology, so you are correct. But that is one of the reasons this is so near and dear to my heart. Your question is something I consider every day. It's one of the reasons I followed the Supreme Court as closely as I did, and I've reported on that with much interest, that was another crazy week when they came down with their decisions. But let me add to the list of potentially anxiety-provoking scenarios the issue of punishment. Because if we're no longer a society that wants to make the punishment fit the crime, that creates an enormous problem of recidivism. Now, we would love to be able to rehabilitate everyone that commits a crime, but we all know that's not possible. It's delightful that some people are open to rehabilitation, and those people become public speakers on how not to get involved in crime to begin with. They speak to high school classes about please don't be my younger self. I wish I knew then what I know now. But that doesn't characterize everybody that chooses to break the law. So threat assessment, thing that's always been near and dear to my heart, because you're talking about not prediction, but prevention. You don't have a crystal ball. You can't always predict who's going to do what, but you can prevent crimes from taking place by keeping venues safe, by making sure that before you have an event, we were talking about the event that's going to happen in your backyard next weekend. There's going to be sweeps of all kinds, dogs on the ground, drones in the air, to make sure it is safe for people to show up. That continues to be something that we can all do together to try to, at least to the extent that we can, exhibit the situational awareness on the front end to be able to have people show up and enjoy themselves when the event actually starts.
Well, the Tyler Robinson case is another 1 hour discussion. It's as it morphs, I'd love to have you back in the future to see the outcome of this case. And because I am concerned about the future of how criminal justice is studied and then administered and managed, and how the legal system, the legislature gets rules in place that make it work in a cohesive way for folks like you, either on the defense or the prosecution side. You had another topic or two you wanted to jump into.
Well, the other topics sort of stem from the issues that we discussed in detail surrounding the fact pattern, let's say, in the Tyler Robinson case.
Oh, keep going. Sure.
Reality that we do have lots of opportunities to gather together in open spaces. Now, we had this exact discussion after the Mandalay Bay shooting. Remember that, where the Stephen Paddock, the assailant, was able to take that aim from the hotel room. One thing that I think really got brought up in Tyler Robinson as well, is you have somebody freely moving through society, perhaps exhibiting red flags or at least odd behavior, and nobody sees them. Now, one of the reasons for that, Gene, as you and I both know, having grown up in a different era, is because nobody's looking up from their cell phones. Cell phones aren't used to call each other. They're used as devices. We are glued to them, and we almost need our own lane to walk in because we're not paying any attention. You may recall we covered a story a couple of years ago where there were texting lanes at universities. But the problem with that is you miss the Tyler Robinsons, the Stephen Paddocks of the world. I did a deep dive into the Paddock case and realized everybody at the casino, recognized him, but no one knew him. We often see that same phenomena with school shooters. A lot of people know who he is, and the persons that maybe he has leaked to. Leakage, of course, in the threat assessment world means forecasting, telegraphing, telling somebody you're thinking about committing a shooting. That was such a small group of people, it never went up on social media and nobody saw it. So I think one of the other broader takeaways from last week is the extent to which we can take to get to know the people around us, whether it's school, the workplace, our fitness center, wherever we spend our time, the firing range. I mean, what great opportunities to really be able to from our devices and get to know our friends, neighbors, family, fans, followers. I mean, wouldn't that be a great world, Gene, where we knew more?
Boy. Well, hopefully, yeah. And hopefully we're learning more from this, which brings up something you said a second ago, social media. Does it make violence more likely or just more visible? What's coming out of what we're seeing in so many outlets these days, some of which you and I broadcast on and give opinions to as well. But is it making us more violent and reactive, or is it just more informative?
Social media is helping inform where and when crime is going to occur. You may think, I mentioned the statistic earlier. It is true. A significant amount of leakage of people saying what they're going to do happens within a close circle of family and friends. Another percentage of it happens online. So if we had the manpower, I know with AI, maybe it'll be easier in the future. If we were able to proactively monitor the social media of a person of interest, we would learn about plans and be able to already do that, Gene. And we never hear enough about how many mass shootings have been thwarted because it's impossible to prove. But you can see the warning signs, you can see it discussed, and we have seen law enforcement allocate resources to areas where there's a lot of chatter. There's a lot of talk about creating a scene for mass violence. Remember that back to the UFC fight, on the president's 80th birthday. That's one of the ways they were able to thwart that. But let me also juxtapose that with good old fashioned police work. That one of the suspect's mothers called in that her son was spending a lot of money on firearms, talking to these people online. So at the end of the day, it all came back to the type of murder she wrote plot my own mother watched when she was younger. Is we can never discount the value, in addition to social media, of good old-fashioned person-to-person communication.
Is it promoting fairness? Is it promoting, it's certainly promoting more awareness, but is it promoting more fairness in the adjudication of crimes?
Often promotes conspiracy theory. It does provide accurate information depending on who you're following. But we all want to make sure we don't silo ourselves and only follow people we like, we believe in, we think are credible, because everybody would be denying themselves the opportunity to hear different viewpoints. And I mean, people are smart. That's one thing I learned 30 years as a prosecutor. Most people are really good, kind, compassionate, and everybody is smart. Who wouldn't want to be exposed to more information, to be able to make up their own minds about what happened? I mean, wouldn't you want to have whatever you're saying on your podcast or social media platform to be informed by a variety of evidence? And wouldn't you also want it to be informed by admissible evidence in court? If you watched even one day of the Tyler Robinson prelim, you recognize how hard it is to get anything in front of this judge. He wanted to hear from both sides. They re-argued it. They argued it again. They cited case law. Whatever eventually made those hoops was pretty solid evidence. It wasn't a theory. It wasn't some type of speculation. It was vetted. It was tested. It was authenticated before it was able to be published. So I would say whoever is engaging on social media would be doing themselves a favor by broadening the extent of information they consume. That's the way it would be more informative.
And to that point, what reforms would you suggest or recommend to improve not only public safety, but justice itself, the system you've been licensed to work in?
Yes, the way in which I would want that to go down would be ways we can make the court of public opinion more like the court of law. On social media, you'll see a suspect, arrested, tried, convicted, and executed before a single shred of evidence makes it into a courtroom. That's not fair to anybody that's accused of a crime. And that makes it even harder to pick a fair jury pool, because everybody that's following social media will come into the courtroom, report for jury duty, fulfill their civic duty, but tainted by whatever they saw online. And that's not fair to anybody that's accused of a crime. And I would also say that's not even fair to the prosecution, because they're coming from behind sometimes if what a potential juror has read on social media has made them believe they're going to see an entirely different case in court, or has made them believe, well, wait a minute, the fact that the prelim took 5 days must mean the evidence was weak. No, it wasn't. But some people come away with wrong thinking as a result of consuming too much social media. Now, by the way, Gene, jurors aren't allowed to follow the trial they're sitting on social media while they're jurors. In fact, we've seen some high-profile cases even result in sequestering a jury. Boy, no juror wants to be sequestered. That means you're in a hotel room, you get your meals served to you, you have limited contact with your family, with each other. That's a last resort. But if you have hype just take on a life of its own, sometimes in some cases, that's all you can do to try to preserve a fair trial. But in this evidentiary hearing, this proof of legitimacy for a case, how do you sequester a jury that hasn't been picked yet, and they're throwing everything in the media? The defense would say, well, I would say, Your Honor, we can't get a fair trial. Everybody in the world has been watching our preliminary hearing. That's right. That's why you didn't see but a fraction of the evidence that's going to be presented at trial at a prelim. It's for exactly that reason, Gene. You don't put everything in evidence in the court of public opinion. That's why a prelim only has a probable cause standard. Like I was saying, a lot of the time it took over the 5 days was arguing over pieces of evidence, arguing over the fact that, something may have been inadvertently visible to the gallery, to the general public. So there was a bit of staging that occurred there too. It wasn't 5 days of throwing things into evidence. In fact, if anything, it was 5 days of objecting. Shouldn't be admissible in evidence. All that is done to preserve, as you point out, a fair jury.
Yeah, you've made the distinction I was about ready to argue, and you've corrected me already, because I do think it was not 5 days of evidence. It was 5 days of procedural wrangling between the judge and except I don't know what that gets us, except a public that's pretty uptight about the way. So that drives to my point with you as my guest today. Folks, Wendy Patrick is with us. And so where does the future of criminal justice go when is this not being on TV the way it is, basically making either the prosecution or the defense, not to mention the judge, a little bit more sober in their approach, more cognizant that they better dot the I's and cross the T's, ergo the delays we're seeing here? Is that where you're going?
A good way to put it, Gene, because think about it. It's one thing to say that courtrooms are public. They are. Throughout my entire career, we had court watchers. A lot of people in the community would come. They enjoyed being there. The excitement. They loved cross-examination. They loved closing arguments. But when you start televising trials, you are correct that you bring everything to an entirely different level. You asked earlier, where does legal wrangling get you? It gets you to the point that credible evidence is now in the record. Without legal wrangling, without objections, it would cast at least doubt upon the legitimacy of whatever was in the record. If you could just put in anything you like, anybody could just say anything. There were no oaths, there were no objections, there was no argument. So to the extent that it's frustrating to watch, on the back end, it's valuable to litigate, because by the time you get to trial, this defense team already knows what this judge is and isn't going to allow. And now what did they do during the prelim? They translate of endless legal wrangling into what we call standing objections, to where they're preserving their record without taking any extra time. So it's the most unsexy part of criminal law, Gene, is us sitting in our offices or sitting in court just arguing. But it does save time in the future, and the jurors will appreciate we did all this in advance by the time we get to trial. And that's true in every case.
It's causing the public and those students who want to be lawyers someday to think differently, or at least develop a different impression of what they think their job's going to be in the future, because they're watching the process morph before their very eyes. At least I have since University of Connecticut, 1975. Oh God, there's my age. But the fact of the matter is, the legal process back then is not the legal process today. And distinctions between states, Wendy, like this pretrial hearing to prove cause or legitimacy, being different from state to state is but one example of many different roles at the state level that distinguish states, state by state. Would you like to see more uniformity in that in the trial system at the state level to mirror a federal appeal, to get to a federal appeal process, and in some cases not need a federal appeal process because of the ambiguity? I'm concerned about, yes, state rights. I'm a strong advocate of it. The Constitution mandates it. But I'm concerned about the ambiguity because of all the nuances that distinguish states from states. Look what's happened in the reverse of the Roe ruling at the Supreme Court. Throw it back to the states. Now it's incumbent upon all 50 states to decide the issue of abortion. You see my point?
Yes, and procedurally, there are lots of legal procedures that are ubiquitous. Every state, every federal district, they're everywhere. Due process being one of them. The ability to cross-examine, confront and cross-examine witnesses. The hearsay rule, authentication, relevancy. I mean, I could go on and on. But I do want to say, I'll close with one point you just made that I thought was dynamite. Why do we worry about states having different rules? The reason is different jurisdictions are composed differently. They have different crimes. You don't have, a rash of bank robberies in some rural jurisdiction in the mountains in Colorado somewhere, where of course you have it in the heart of a big city. You have different kinds of crimes that occur in rural jurisdictions with hunting rifles, maybe, that don't mirror the kind of crimes that occur in a casino. You have white collar crime, you have retail crime, you have domestic violence, child abuse, human trafficking, which is easier where it's a quick exit to a thoroughfare, to a border somewhere. So it's incumbent on the states to look at their own jurisdictional issues and sometimes fashion laws that address how can we keep our community safe. And that even occurs at the municipal level, goes all the way down the chain to allow every jurisdiction to be able to, if they would like, and if they can get passed, and if people want to vote for it, however it's becoming a law, it gives everybody a say in the process to make sure that you can keep every community safe. Back to community safety at the end of the broadcast, too. Very important.
A smorgasbord of legal insight from Wendy Patrick. Closing comments, Wendy. I know we're out of time.
Those would be my closing comments, because I think that distinction state by state, and and combined with the generalization federally that there are just some values, the constitutional procedures and protections, those apply to everyone. That really is the backdrop upon which we take any court, whether it is, dog off a leash or a capital murder. We make sure we do have that backdrop of due process and constitutional protection. That's who we are as a country. And that's one of the things that July 4th really reinforced and united us, that we do live in the greatest country. And thank God this is the country in which I practice law, and you're able to be exercising your First Amendment right on the airwaves every day.
Well, thank you for having your time with me. I enjoy exercising that right and delving and doing the deep dive, as they say. Wendy Patrick, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Wendy Patrick, Beyond the Courtroom. Dr. Wendy Patrick is one of the country's most recognizable legal commentators, with more than 8,000. Wow, I read this and I was amazed. More than 8,000 media appearances on CNN, Fox News, Fox Business, Newsmax. That's where I know Wendy from, was Fox Business, and Newsmax, and the Headline News, and numerous other national radio and television programs. She is known for taking complex legal issues and making them understandable for the public. Wendy, you're invited back. I'd love to have you back to do a follow-up on some of the issues we discussed.
Thank you. Anytime.
Thank you again. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for another episode of Gene Valentino's Grassroots Truthcast. See you soon.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets, as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, MyPillow mattresses and MyPillow mattress toppers, as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets. Regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard MyPillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, there's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.